Well, Tanner Scott is officially a Dodger. Jack Flaherty is probably not going to be a Dodger. And according to him, he's not even getting much interest from other teams. And Ippei Mizuhara, we have more proof that he was guilty as sin of all the things he was accused of. And he is begging for mercy from the court. We'll dig into all that. So let's get live on Locked On Dodgers.
You are Locked On Dodgers, your daily Los Angeles Dodgers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, Dodger fans, this is Locked On Dodgers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks to our everydayers for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen every weekday morning. And thanks to those of you who are with me live here on Thursday evening. For those of you, remember this show is free and available on all podcast platforms and on YouTube simply by searching for Locked On Dodgers. And you can make it easy on yourself by subscribing wherever you're watching or listening right now. If this is your first time with us, my name is Jeff Snider. My normal co-host is Vince Samperio, although it's just me tonight. Vince and I are both lifelong Dodger fans, just like most of you. We've also both spent time covering the Dodgers in the press box and the locker room, so we bring you the smart fans' perspective on our boys in blue every weekday morning. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. From the first whistle to the final drive, FanDuel makes NFL playoffs even more exciting. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win your first bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. And speaking of get started, that's what we're going to do here. Again, it's just me tonight, so I am going to do my best to keep an eye on the chat and interact with you guys. But as you know, it's a little bit harder when I am by myself because I have to be talking the whole time. And so it's hard to talk and read things at the same time, but I will do my best. The big news with the Dodgers on Thursday, they made it official that Tanner Scott is now on the team. They had their press conference this afternoon, and it was short and sweet and no major insights, but a couple things that are worth talking about. Brandon Gomes in the introduction. Actually, was it Brandon Gomes or Andrew Friedman who was talking at that point in time? I can't remember now. I was watching. Don't remember which one of them said these words. He said that part of the reason that the Dodgers were really interested in getting Tanner Scott was because he is no fun to face as a pitcher. And then Tanner Scott, in his comments, kind of said the inverse is true too. One of the things that really appeals to him about coming to the Dodgers is that the Dodgers are no fun to face. And he mentioned a few times the big three at the top of the order. Obviously, there's a lot been made about his success against Shohei Ohtani. In Ohtani's career against Tanner Scott, 10 plate appearances, 1 hit, 1 walk. The 1 hit was an RBI single in a big spot late in the season last year. 3 strikeouts, hasn't hit the ball extremely hard against him. Tanner Scott has had Shohei Ohtani's number. Obviously, 10 plate appearances is a tiny sample size. He has done really well against Shohei. Now, Freddie Freeman, it's a little bit different. 7 plate appearances. Freddie is 2 for 7 with a double. And so that's a 286 batting average, 429 slugging percentage. And so 714 OPS, which is not great, but much better than most people do against Tanner Scott, especially left-handers. And Freddie has only struck out once in those 7 plate appearances. The big one is Mookie. Mookie is 3 for 6 with a double, a homer, no strikeouts. So that's a 500 batting average, 500 on base percentage, 1167 slugging for a 1667 OPS. Mookie has dominated Tanner Scott. Now, obviously, 6 plate appearances is an even smaller sample size than 10 plate appearances, #math. But I would assume that when Tanner Scott is talking about it being no fun to face the Dodgers top of the order, he's mostly seeing Mookie Betts' face there. But Freddie Freeman and Shohei Ohtani put up good, tough at-bats too. And so it was fun to see kind of how both sides agree we should just be on the same side because it's no fun being against each other. And I like that. Tanner Scott, he joked, he's really tight with Evan Phillips. He joked that he heard too much from Evan Phillips this offseason, was tired of hearing from him so much. Obviously, he was joking. They're good buddies. We're hoping to have Evan Phillips back on the show sometime before spring training starts. He was on last year, as you know. Great guest, one of my favorite guests, very insightful dude. And I would like to get his thoughts on the Dodgers ruining baseball. So hopefully we'll get him back on in the next couple of weeks. We're working on that. But Tanner Scott is close with him and said he hasn't really met the other guys yet, hasn't really gotten to know any of them yet. And so he's looking forward to getting to know them. It's kind of funny. Left-handed pitchers have kind of a reputation of being quirky and stuff, and he doesn't look like it. But at one point during the press conference, there were 2 microphones in front of him, and it was just distracting him so much he finally had to move one of the microphones. And I'm like, okay, there's our lefty reliever. That's a left-handed move. And just, quirky. They don't wear their hats sideways anymore like they used to. It was fun to see a little bit of that quirkiness that you want in a lights out reliever. You want somebody who's just a little bit weird. We have that with a lot of the guys in the Dodgers bullpen. I think he's going to fit right in with the Dogs. Obviously, stuff wise, he is elite. And one of the questions that was asked to Brandon Gomes was, is Tanner Scott going to be the closer? And he said, Tanner Scott's going to get plenty of opportunities to save games. And Andrew Friedman chimed in a little bit. Basically, the way I heard it was, we have a lot of guys who can close games, and it's a good situation to be in. And so I don't think that Tanner Scott will be the closer. I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up leading the team in saves, but I'd be really surprised if he gets more than 20 saves, because I do think those saves are going to be spread around, because the fact is the Dodgers are planning on winning a lot of games, and maybe they're going to win a lot of games by a lot of runs. And so there won't be as many save situations. So maybe it will be every time there's a save situation, Tanner Scott hasn't pitched in a couple days. So maybe he would get the bulk of them. But, the fact is, if the tough part of the order, including tough lefties, is coming up in the 8th inning, that's when Tanner Scott's probably going to pitch. Of course, they also have Alex Vesia and Anthony Bonda. Having 3 lefties in the bullpen will be interesting. But yeah, I think the Dodgers are going to continue to play matchups. And having so many guys who could potentially get saves is a very good situation to be in. It's not even a nice problem to have for a manager. It's just a nice situation. It's not a problem at all, especially because everybody buys in. And that was what Andrew Friedman chimed in. He said, just for the record, Tanner Scott said he doesn't care about his role. He wants to win. And that's what the Dodgers are looking for. Another interesting thing that Tanner Scott mentioned was that the Dodgers were the first team to reach out to him. I saw some people on social media interpreting that to mean that nobody reached out to Tanner Scott for the first couple of months of free agency. The way I interpreted it was that the Dodgers reached out back in early November when free agency first started, and then let him know their interest, and then he took a couple months to make the decision. Not that nobody reached out to him until January. I think the Dodgers reached out immediately because we could all see, and the Dodgers could obviously see, Tanner Scott is the best reliever on the free agent market, and we want him. And so it makes sense that they reached out to him. And all in all, he felt out his options. He looked at what could possibly be, and he ended up choosing to come to the Dodgers. And I am pretty darn happy about it. It just makes the Dodgers bullpen that much better. The bullpen was a strength for a lot of last season, and the bullpen was a strength in the postseason for the most part. And now it's just even better with bringing back Blake Trinan, adding Tanner Scott. It's going to be a good bullpen. It'll be interesting to see how it shakes out, what it actually looks like when the season gets going. But you definitely cannot complain about Tanner Scott. And yeah, like BC says here in the chat, one of the things Tanner Scott said he's hoping to win 4 World Series in the 4 years that he's with the Dodgers. And I think all of us can get on board with that for sure. I'm going to come back in a minute. I'm going to talk about another free agent, this one, Jack Flaherty, who was most recently a Dodger. He was on Foul Territory today, had some really interesting things to say about free agency and his current status and all of that. So thank you for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen, and please continue to keep it Locked On Dodgers. This episode is brought to you by Select Quote. In sports, having a winning strategy is everything. It's how the best teams make it to the Super Bowl, the World Series, and the Olympics. The same goes for life. Having a strategy like life insurance from Select Quote can protect your financial legacy and keep your family's future secure. SelectQuote makes it easy to find the perfect life insurance policy. As one of America's leading insurance brokers with nearly 40 years of experience, they've helped over 2 million customers find $700 billion in coverage since 1985. What sets SelectQuote apart is their personal touch. Unlike other brokers that offer one-size-fits-all policies, their licensed agents tailor coverage to fit your unique needs. If you're in good health, you might even qualify for same-day coverage of up to $5 million with no medical exam required. And it's more affordable than you think. You can get up to $1 million in coverage for as little as $20 a month. So get the right life insurance for you for less at selectquote.com/lockedon. Go to selectquote.com/lockedon today to get started. That's selectquote.com/lockedon. SelectQuote. They shop, you save. I am back. Thank you for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen every weekday morning. Thanks for making us your last listen of Thursday evening. If you're here with me live, I appreciate that. Good group of you here. Good chat going on. Remember, you can go beyond the podcast and become a Locked On Dodgers insider by going to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnDodgers. You'll get our text messages about news and rumors and stuff before the podcast hits. There's also a Discord server for our insiders to talk to each other. It's been a lot of fun. For your second listen, be sure to check out Locked On MLB, hosted by our buddy Paul Francis Sullivan, a.k.a. Sully. And be sure to check out Locked On Sports Today and Locked On Sports Los Angeles, two 24/7 streaming channels on YouTube from the Locked On Podcast Network. Just looking at the chat really quick. All right, so let's talk about Jack Flaherty. There's some talk about Flaherty in the chat, and that is what we were going to talk about next anyway, so it all works out. Jack Flaherty was on foul territory with Scott Braun and AJ Pierzynski and Eric Kratz, I think. And they were talking to him, and some really interesting stuff came out, including the fact that basically Jack Flaherty has gotten no interest this offseason. And it's weird. According to him, there hasn't even been a, hey, what are you looking for? Let's see if we can make something work. Hasn't even gotten to that level of interest. And so you could say, well, teams don't want to sign a guy for 6 years when he's only had one good year in a row or whatever. But it seems like they haven't even gotten to the point of how many years are you looking for? And maybe his agent has put it out. Here's what he's looking for. And that's why he's not getting interest. But it seems like, it seems weird that he's not getting more sniffs because, he is a very good pitcher. And obviously we as Dodger fans saw, sorry, is my Wi-Fi being bad tonight? I just see somebody saying in the chat that my Wi-Fi is bad. That's weird. I've got super fast internet. Maybe my boys are playing video games upstairs and using up some of my internet. Sorry, guys. Nothing I can do about it here. Hopefully you can hear me at least, even if I'm choppy. I probably look better when I'm choppy anyway. But anyway, we as Dodger fans saw firsthand that Jack Flaherty is not a perfect pitcher. Nobody is a perfect pitcher. And we saw him. He had a few real clunkers in the postseason, but he also had a couple really good games in the postseason and several really good games in the regular season after he came over from the Tigers. And, it might just be a difference of expectations that Flaherty is looking for ace money or an ace contract, and that teams are thinking of him as more of a number 3 starter. And, and we've talked in the past about how if Flaherty's market really doesn't develop and he's looking for a 1-year make good deal, I'd love to have Jack Flaherty back on a 1-year deal. I don't know if that's realistic. He even said on foul territory, he said, I can see the writing on the wall. I'm not going back to the Dodgers. And so something would have to change for that to happen. I just lost my train of thought. But I guess the reason I think that even if Flaherty got to the point where he's looking for a 1-year deal, maybe the Dodgers aren't a fit from his standpoint is because he would be their 5th or 6th starter. And in a 6-man rotation, so not getting as many starts. Now, maybe that would appeal to him. Hey, that's more rest, and I can, go out and be dominant in my 28 starts and prove myself but maybe he's looking to prove that he can do 32 dominant starts and wouldn't have that opportunity with the Dodgers. So I don't hate the idea of having Jack Flaherty back with the Dodgers because even with all the starting pitching depth they have, you could do a lot worse than having Jack Flaherty as your fifth or sixth starter. And but I just don't see it happening, and I don't think he does either. But it is really weird that nobody is reaching out to him. Nobody is interested. He said he wouldn't mind going back to Detroit. He really liked it there. He seems to have a really good relationship. That whole staff, he felt like a lot of what made him better in 2024 had to do with the Tigers doing a good job with their development, what they do. And so he has a lot of respect for that Tigers organization. He didn't seem to have a lot of respect for the Orioles, the other team that he played for most recently. And he briefly alluded to kind of the bad blood as he was leaving St. Louis. So, and the Cardinals aren't looking to spend any money anyway. And maybe the Orioles aren't either. Who knows? But, I'm interested to see what happens. I do think at this point, maybe it is going to be a 1-year deal or maybe one of those like a Blake Snell deal from last year, the 3-year contract with an opt-out after the first year. But I feel like Jack Flaherty currently is undervalued by teams, and or at least the value isn't matching up his expectations and theirs. So it's interested to see what happens. I had still been, I hadn't ruled out Jack Flaherty coming back to the Dodgers. After listening to him on Foul Territory, I think I've probably ruled it out. But also, I think there's a lot of reasons it would make sense if he is looking for that short-term deal. I don't think the Dodgers would want to do the 3-year deal with opt-outs. I think they'd want to do a straight 1-year make good deal. But then Flaherty would be hitting free agency again at age 30. And there's worse things to do. If he could come out and prove, hey, look, this is really me now. I've had 2 straight good years. You should sign me. It could work out for everybody. But probably not going to happen in Dodger blue. I do wish him the best. He was a very fun part of late in the Dodger season. And the fact is he saved them a little bit. When the Dodgers got Jack Flaherty, we didn't know that Tyler Glasnow would be out for the season. We didn't know that Gavin Stone would get hurt and be out for the season. We didn't know that Clayton Kershaw would miss the postseason. Although, realistically, we weren't expecting Kershaw to be a number 1 starter in the postseason anyway. But we didn't know all these things. And in hindsight, yeah, maybe the Dodgers should have got 2 pitchers at the trade deadline. Obviously, it worked out. They won the World Series. I don't know if you heard. It's right there on my patch. But he was a big part of saving the bullpen, helping the bullpen get back on track because he went deep in games. That's something that he does better than a lot of pitchers. All that. So nothing but fondness for Jack Flaherty, even with the clunkers in the postseason. I do wonder if my perception is a little bit different than other people's, just because I didn't watch. Mark, come on, man. Says he feels like he's watching me on Real Player. Hey, man, I really do apologize about this internet, guys. This is weird. I'm like a hardwired gigabit connection. I should be cruising right now. I don't know why I'm not. But what I was saying, I don't know if my perception is different because I didn't watch most of the Mets series, the NLCS, because I was out. I was on vacation. You remember, where I didn't have TV and didn't even have the internet, and so I literally listened to the games on the satellite radio in my car as much as I could. And so I was listening to that game, to Jack Flaherty's clunker against the Mets, but I didn't watch it. And maybe that makes my perception of him a little bit different. Obviously, I did watch his clunker in Game 5 of the World Series, and the fact that the Dodgers came back and won that game obviously helps there. All in all, yeah, I'm a big Jack Flaherty fan. I wish him the best, and I wouldn't mind that best happening with the Dodgers in 2025. But I think it's probably not going to happen from here on out. So I'm going to come back in a minute. We don't talk about the Ippei Mizuhara drama very much. Obviously, it was a big story last March, and we talked about it a lot back then. And we occasionally, when developments have happened, we've mentioned it when we needed to. there was enough of a development on Thursday that we need to talk about it. And so we'll dig into that a little bit. It was interesting stuff. We'll talk about that. And then, you know what, if you guys want to start throwing some questions in the chat, I might do a rapid fire Q&A because we're not going to fill 10 minutes with Ippei talk because that sounds no fun. So I'll be back in a minute to talk a little bit about Ippei and then answer your questions. So please keep it locked on Dodgers. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. From the first whistle to the final drive, FanDuel makes the NFL playoffs even more exciting. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win your first bet. That's $300 to keep the action going. Look, there's a lot of different ways you can make that first $5 bet. I think the easiest one is you find a game that you're sure about the winner, and you bet on that. As I've mentioned, the NFL playoffs usually at this stage, when you're in the conference championship games, you don't have big mismatches, but it looks like the Eagles against the Commanders this weekend could be one of those mismatches. Eagles are currently minus 290 favorites, so heavy favorites to win that game. If you're confident in the Eagles, put $5 on the Eagles to win that game, and then if they do, then you get $300 in bonus bets just for being right, and then you can use those bonus bets on more risky stuff or whatever you want to do. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today and get started with $300 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, I am back. Thank you again for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen. Thanks for being an everydayer if you are. Thanks for being here live with me on Thursday evening. Appreciate that. Be sure to check out Locked On Sports Today and Locked On Sports Los Angeles on YouTube. Be sure to become a Locked On Dodgers insider at joinsubtext.com/LockedOnDodgers. So Ippei Mizuhara was originally, after he pled guilty, he was originally supposed to be sentenced back in October. I think it was the 25th or 26th he was scheduled to be sentenced, which I remember somebody saying it was either game 1 or game 2 of the World Series. That got delayed, got pushed back to December, then it got pushed back to January. I think it's currently pushed back to March. But it seems like they're going to finally sentence him. There was released today the audio of one of his fraudulent calls to a bank where he pretended to be Shohei Ohtani. There's a couple things, if you know about Ippei Mizuhara and Shohei Ohtani, that tip you off in this audio that it's Ippei and not Shohei. For one thing, it's Ippei's voice and not Shohei's voice. For another thing, it is completely fluent English, which if Shohei was fluent in English, he wouldn't have needed Ippei Mizuhara as his interpreter. Very clearly, and it makes sense. Like, why would he disguise his voice? Because he's calling a bank. The bank doesn't know. All he has to do is prove that he's Shohei with information that he has. And so that's what he did. It just another nail in the coffin of anybody who's still beating the drum of MLB covered up for Shohei. Like, okay, so MLB and the IRS covered up for Shohei Ohtani, convinced Ippei to plead guilty, and manufactured an audio tape of Ippei pretending to be Shohei to a bank. Like, they're manufacturing evidence too, all because Shohei is a good baseball player. It doesn't pass the smell test. It never has. It doesn't mean people will believe it. There are still so many stupid people in this world who let their intelligence go out the window when the fandom comes in the window. And so they will still continue to believe that Shohei Ohtani was the one gambling and not Ippei. But those of us with functioning brains, we know the truth. The other notable development was that Ippei did write a letter to the judge about his sentencing. And, the government is pushing for a 5-year prison sentence for Ippei. Ippei is asking for 18 months. And he wrote a 3-page letter to the judge explaining why he did what he did, basically. And it's like, I have some sympathy for the guy. You can tell he was basically, the crux of his letter is, I was overworked and underpaid and I needed money. And so I met this bookie. I didn't know he was an illegal bookie. I thought, I can make some money gambling. That'll help alleviate my money problems. Turns out he was bad at gambling. So it exacerbated his money problems. And in the end, he ended up stealing money from Shohei Ohtani to cover those gambling debts, et cetera, et cetera. I have sympathy for the guy. A couple things. What you do when you are overworked and underpaid is you ask for a raise. And if you don't get the raise, you look for a different job. That's what adults do in the real world. And Ippei didn't do that. And then he says he didn't know until early 2024 that his bookie was an illegal bookie. Maybe that's true. I don't gamble at all. And I would know that he was illegal. I don't know. It seems to me like it's hard to believe that he really didn't know, or at least suspect, oh, this guy I met in a smoky card room might not be totally on the up and up. This guy who is threatening to tell my boss about my debts might not be on the up and up. I don't know if I believe that. And ultimately, when you look at the big picture, what he's saying is, I was overworked and underpaid, and that's why I stole $16 million from my boss. If we were talking $250, if we were talking $1,000, okay, I get it. This is 16, 18 million bucks, whatever it was. Way too many millions, way too many zeros in that number for me to have too much sympathy for him. And he talks about how my wife and I want to have kids, and that's going to be hard if I'm in prison because we're both getting older. I don't even know. I assume Ippei's expected to pay back that money that he stole from Shohei, which he's never going to be able to do. So I don't know if having a family is realistic for them. I don't know, but it's an interesting letter if you want to read it. I'm interested to see if they do have some mercy on him. I don't know if Shohei will make a statement, for or against having mercy on him. It'll be interesting to see when he is sentenced, but he's going to be sentenced because he committed some major, major crimes and is going to prison for it. And that is probably the last time we'll talk about Ippei until he is officially sentenced, and then we may not ever talk about him again after that. Okay, I'm just looking at the chat to see. Let's see. Noah asks, what else is there left for Padre fans to suffer more? Yeah, Jerks and Profar signed with the Braves today. The Padres have still not done anything this offseason. You know what? They could suffer as much as they want. I'm fine with it. I don't mind. Tim says, are you worried that there will be another lockout when this CBA expires? I'm not worried yet. I think fans are making a bigger deal out of it. I don't think owners or players have an issue with deferred money. And the fact is, this offseason, the Dodgers seem to be one of the only teams interested in getting better. And that may have an impact, but we're still a couple years away from that. And every offseason is different. So I'm not worried yet, but I think it's going to be a contentious negotiation like it always is. And then we'll see what goes after that. Mark says, one podcaster keeps pushing a St. Louis trade for you-know-who. That you-know-who I assume is Nolan Arenado. Is Max Muncy moving to second out of the question? I don't know if it's out of the question. The Dodgers seem intent on Max Muncy being their third baseman. I'm not convinced that Max Muncy could play a good defensive second base now that the shift is banned. I think he was fine there when there was a shift. I don't think he has the range to be a even close to average second baseman right now. And so I don't see it happening. And then people said, well, what about Arenado at second base? I think Arenado is roughly as rangy as Max Muncy. Arenado is an elite defensive third baseman because of his reactions and his arm. And both of those things are not nearly as useful at second base. So I just have a hard time seeing a fit for Arenado on the Dodgers unless Muncy actually gets hurt. That's my thought on that. Let's see. Just scrolling through the chat to see if there's other questions. How do you say big dummy in Japanese? I don't know. Do you think the Dodgers should focus on staying healthy or go for the all-time record? My buddy Chris Corman asks that. I assume in the all-time wins record. I think it's kind of a why not both situation. I think the Dodgers will, the last month of the season, once they've locked up the division, I think they will focus a little bit more on staying healthy, but also you can never stay totally healthy. There's nothing you can do to guarantee health, and so I think the Dodgers are not going to let their foot off the gas. They kind of, this last year they learned, oh, we kind of had to battle till the end, and that seemed to work out for us in the postseason. And so I expect 115 wins for the Dodgers, somewhere in that range, give or take 10. I am saying I don't think 125 is totally out of the question. Mark says I would have no sympathy for Ippei if he did it to me. I think I would have sympathy. I think I would feel about the same way. I would be more concerned about getting my $16 million back than how long Ippei spends in prison. But yeah, I mean, the fact is he stole a whole bunch of money from somebody who trusted him. And no matter what sob story there is, that is a big deal. Chris asked, what trade do you see the Dodgers trying to put together, unload CT3? I think the Dodgers, if they decide to trade Chris Taylor, the trade will be who will take him and what do we have to do to make it happen. I don't think that there's going to be anything on the Dodgers side expectation-wise other than willing to take Chris Taylor, and beyond that, anything else is a bonus. It looks like that's, unless I missed anything, that looks like all the questions in the chat, which is good because we are about out of time. That'll do it for me for today. That'll do it for us for this week. Unless something happens this weekend like it did last weekend, I wouldn't be surprised. We might see a trade this weekend because Kirby Yates, I assume he's passing his physical roughly right now. And so the Dodgers are going to want to make that official sometime soon, which would mean opening up a spot on the 40-man roster, either by a trade or a DFA or something. So maybe something will happen this weekend. If it's big enough, we will hop on and do a bonus episode, but we'll have to see what happens. So that'll do it. Thank you all for being here with me live. Thanks for making us your first listen. Be sure to be an everydayer by watching or listening every weekday morning, and make that easier on yourself by subscribing wherever you're watching or listening right now. Also, be sure to check out Locked On Sports Today and Locked On Sports Los Angeles, the two 24/7 streaming channels on YouTube from the Locked On Podcast Network. You can also go beyond the podcast and become a Locked On Dodgers insider by going to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnDodgers. You can follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at Locked On Dodgers. Vince is on Twitter at VinceSince91. I'm on Twitter at Snydog, and both of our DMs are open there. You can also email us at lockedondodgers@gmail.com, or send us a voicemail or a text message to 323-863-LOCK-5625. We are here every weekday morning, and we hope you'll be here with us. When you get in your car or sit on your couch, tell your smart device to play podcast Locked On Dodgers. And remember, you don't have to agree. You just have to listen. We will talk to you Sunday evening.